Sukuna is not and was not ever a cursed spirit. And yeah, we got to do this again. Alright, so I usually don't waste my time responding to arrogant, condescending comments, so y'all don't get used to this, but today, I got time. So, as you can see here, months ago, I put out a video explaining why Sukuna wasn't a curse. And I just recently got this comment that says, seeing this after the end of the manga is funny when Sukuna's last words were, I am a curse. And so I responded and said he wasn't speaking literally. And then I got this lovely novel of a response, and don't worry, we'll address all of these points, but the cherry on top, as it always is with these type of people, is this final comment here. Maybe next time read the manga before questioning someone who did. Okay, so before we get into he who must not be questioned specific points, I want to give a general overview on this because it is a large point of confusion for a lot of people in the community. That's why I made that original video months ago. So why is Sukuna referred to the king of curses if he's not a cursed spirit? Make it make sense, right? And I think the first thing we need to talk about is the word curse itself within the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. That word is used in far broader contexts beyond just delineating a literal curse spirit. And in fact, the word curse is a catch-all for basically all things evil and bad in that world. For example, we know that Gojo, Yuji, Megami, Nobara, etc., all of the good guys, if we can call it that, are known as Jujutsu sorcerers, right? Utilizers of cursed energy for the forces of good. At least good insofar as the societal structure deems it. And I don't know why I'm getting philosophical here. It's beside the point, okay? Jujutsu sorcerers are the good guys, right? Well, what do we call the bad guys? We don't call them Jujutsu sorcerers, even though they also use cursed energy. No, we call them curse users. And that's not to imply that they're cursed spirits. It's just that's a word that's used with a kind of negative or evil connotation. For example, the assassins that tried to take out a young Gojo, or the baghead guy that tried to kidnap Riko Amanai, or even Geto after he defected, right? All of them were curse users, not curse spirits, though. In the same way, Sukuna was a curse user, and I think that at least partly helped attribute to his title King of Curses. However, I do think it went a step beyond that because let's just look at this guy, right? 4 arms, 2 mouths, a weird-ass face. If you saw him strolling down a back alley, your first thought is probably going to be, that's a curse, not a human. Look at him, right? He's a freak. But they'd be wrong. He is a human. We know this. He was born and bred the old-fashioned way, right? He had a mom. He had a dad. He even had a twin brother there for a little bit. And I think the whole unique situation around the twin, which we're not going to get into for this, but that is why he looks this way. He had a, conjoined twin, potentially, at the very least, a twin in the womb that he absorbed, and boom, Real Sukuna came out, basically, looking like this. So, yeah, I think a lot of people, not just readers of Jujutsu Kaisen, but people that exist within the canon of Jujutsu Kaisen, mistook him for a curse. But he wasn't a curse. He was a human. So, again, I think that's why he ultimately became known as the King of Curses, because he was a walking calamity, right? This man rose to the top as a human, basically leaving destruction in his wake, right? His infamy rose, his legend rose, thus he was crowned the King of Curses. I think a lot of people can follow me up to this point, but here is where there's a lot of confusion, and that's when Sukuna became the 20 cursed fingers. Some people think that Sukuna died and then became a curse, which basically took on the form of these 20 fingers. That's incorrect. Sukuna never died. He was never defeated, never beaten, never killed in the Heian era. He himself chose to turn himself into 20 fingers of his own free will. Kenjaku taught him how to do this, and he did it so that he could traverse time as a functionally immortal being in order to reemerge in a new era and hopefully find new challengers. Homeboy did this because he was bored and was like, y'all suck, wake me up in 1,000 years. Not because he was beaten and forced into this, or again, died and converted into a cursed spirit, similar to, let's say, Rika or Naoya, which we'll touch on a little bit more here in a second. No, Sukuna did this of his own free will. And it is fair to say that at this point, he kind of ceased being fully human, but he didn't become a cursed spirit. He became a cursed object. And you might say, what's the difference? And there's a huge difference. A cursed object is basically just a third classification of being. It is not the same as a cursed spirit at all. Sukuna is no more cursed spirit than any of the other incarnated sorcerers, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who would try to argue that any of these people are cursed spirits. They just make that argument for Sukuna because of his title and, again, the way that he looks. But he's the same classification of identity as they are, as well as Yorozu in Megami's sister, right? They're all humans that basically just had their souls put into objects in order to become immortal and traverse time. Kind of like a Horcrux from Harry Potter. If Sukuna and the rest of the incarnated cursed object sorcerers were cursed spirits, then they would be weak to positive cursed energy and they wouldn't even be able to utilize reverse curse technique themselves. And as we can see here, when Mahoraga hits Sukuna with the Blade of Extermination coated in positive cursed energy, he says, "If I was a cursed spirit, I'd be a goner." And then finally, I want to address Sukuna's last words here because he does say, "I'm a curse." But like I mentioned at the start of this video, that word has a lot more baggage beyond just denoting a cursed spirit, right? And Sukuna in these final moments wasn't just proudly exclaiming, "I'm a cursed spirit." No, he was saying he's a curse. And this just ties into the entire philosophical, ideological climax of Jujutsu Kaisen, where it's positioning Yuji as this empathetic human versus Sukuna, who willingly threw his humanity away. He has basically lived as a curse and like a curse for his entire life, but he's not. He's a human, right? And here, Sukuna is defiantly in his final moments still exclaiming that, like, Yuji, stop trying to get through to me, bro. We aren't the same. Don't underestimate me. I'm a curse. And as you can see here, even in the TCB translations, they put this in quotation marks because they know he's not being literal. It's more of a philosophical point he's making here. I mean, if you'll even recall back to the domain expansion with Yuji, where he's trying to get through to him, trying to show him another perspective, and Sukuna says, "This means nothing to me. Like, this does not get through to me at all." So now with all that out of the way, let's address these points, starting with these first two because they're similar. Why does he disintegrate like a cursed spirit when he dies? And why does Megami tell Yuji he's going to exorcise him as a curse? So why did he disintegrate away like a cursed spirit instead of just lying like a corpse on the ground if he's a human, right? Well, it's because he's not a human. He's an incarnated cursed object, which we talked about earlier, right? And in this moment, I think it was largely kind of artistic direction from Gege on how he wanted to do these final moments, but it also just makes sense with everything we know, right? Because Sukuna, again, as an incarnated cursed object, needs a host. That's why he used Yuji's body and then Megami's body, right? Which means if you were to take one of them out, their bodies would still lie on the ground and not disintegrate, as we saw with other incarnated sorcerers like Ryu, for example, when Sukuna took him out. He didn't disintegrate because he's in a living host. Yuji was able to strip the incarnated Sukuna out of Megami thanks to his soul punches and soul cleaves, right? So he basically was able to strip like the true essence of Sukuna, if you will, from him, which again is just kind of this ethereal thing because he placed his soul into fingers to become incarnated cursed objects. So no longer human, but not a cursed spirit. And so that essence, devoid of a host, is now just materializing away. And then in episode 1, and probably a bunch of other times throughout the manga when sorcerers use the term exorcise in reference to Sukuna, it's just like the colloquial use of the term, right? It doesn't mean he's a cursed spirit. And in this case specifically, Megami didn't know what was going on. He doesn't know the full history of Sukuna. He probably thinks of him as a curse in this moment. You know, he doesn't know the truth about incarnated cursed objects and what Kenjaku was able to teach all of these people to do. So his base knowledge of the way the world works in this moment is, well, my friend just ate that cursed object and he transformed into this demon guy. I gotta exorcise him now. Next up, why does Sukuna show up with the cursed spirits after they all die when the humans go to the airport place, including Toji? And why does he reincarnate like cursed spirits do? All right, so first of all, the Gojo airport scene does not represent like the human afterlife. This is unique to Gojo. This was his personal kind of limbo afterlife scene, which is why the only people there are the people like closest to him in that way. Toji, of course, being a fundamental part of shaping who he was. That's why he's there. And I mean, we even see that Nanami doesn't show up in an airport when he passes away. He has his little Malaysia moment and then sees Haibara, very similar to how Gojo sees those closest to him. But yeah, the airport scene is not like the human afterlife. So because we don't see Sukuna there does not mean he's not a human. Next, I don't think this is the scene that Chuckles was referencing, but I just want to cover my bases here because we see Sukuna spend time with Jogo, a cursed spirit, right before he passes away. So some people might think this is like the cursed spirit afterlife and Sukuna was there, right? But no, Sukuna tells us what this moment was when he first enters Yuji's domain expansion. He says, I've experienced this before, the rare phenomenon of connecting with the sorcerer during the height of battle, which, if you recall, this is when Jogo and Sukuna were giving each other their best shots with fire, right? So this was that rare heightened moment that he was speaking of. But no, I'm pretty sure you're referring to this scene where after Sukuna does die, he ends up in this weird realm with Mahito. But once again, this is not like the cursed spirit afterlife. Mahito even explicitly tells us what's going on here. My technique messes with the soul after all. Consider this a vestige. Welcome to the pathway souls walk on their way down the cycle. Talking about the cycle of samsara, rebirth. It's all Buddhism, which is all over JJK, right? So this isn't, the equivalent airport scene for cursed spirits. This is a unique property of what Mahito is able to do with his curse technique, and he basically left this on Sukuna's soul so that the moment he died, he would be able to interface with him like this. And I would stand to guess that he also did this to Yuji. So the day Yuji dies, I wonder if he too would have a conversation with Mahito before he progresses on the rest of his afterlife journey. And I'm actually really glad you brought up this scene because the whole point of this scene is to showcase Sukuna's humanity and the difference he shares between an actual cursed spirit. He is able to, in his defeat, recognize where he went wrong and understand the value in other life choices, as he even thinks back saying, I did have two other ways I could have gone. Maybe next time I'll explore one of those. And Mahito can't handle it. He's saying, like, what the hell, you've gone soft. Like, why am I the only one out here, stuck in my ways? And it's because he is a cursed spirit, born of and entirely consisted of negative emotions, right? He has no real agency in making this type of choice. Sukuna, however, does, showcasing his humanity. And then to your point of why does Sukuna reincarnate like cursed spirits do? He doesn't. I don't know what you're talking about with that. So if you're referring to the fact that he turned himself into fingers and then re-emerged 1,000 years later, that is because he turned himself into incarnated cursed object. It is not the same thing as a cursed spirit reincarnation at all. What that's referring to with people like Mahito, Jogo, Hanami, and Dagon is the fact that they were born of negative emotions surrounding a specific topic, right? Mahito about the fear of other humans. Hanami, nature, Dagon, water, right? So even if you destroy them, those concepts and things still exist in the human world. So whether it takes 1,000 or 10,000 years later, eventually there will be enough negative emotions surrounding the topic of the fear of humanity that yet another disaster curse embodying those fears will be reborn. A new Mahito, if you will, but it won't be the same Mahito. So that's the cycle of reincarnation as far as cursed spirits are concerned. Sukuna has never done anything like that. The reincarnation cycle, as far as he is concerned, is the samsara cycle in Buddhism, like we already spoke about, which Gege has alluded to, has nothing to do with cursed spirits, right? The same way that Sukuna's twin brother's soul reincarnated in Yuji's father. That's just like a part of this world, right? So Sukuna could be capable of that, but that would not paint him in the same light as a cursed spirit at all. Alrighty, let's continue. Meanwhile, your only point was he wasn't speaking literally. My only point, as if we were like having a debate. But we are now, so hopefully you're having fun. And before you say it, cursed objects contain cursed spirits. No, they don't. Like I already pointed out earlier, there is a distinction between an incarnated cursed object and a cursed spirit. You are not a cursed spirit when you become an incarnated cursed object. You're an incarnated cursed object. I'm not going to go over it again. But you say the exception is when it's a cursed womb death painting, in which case you're both human and cursed spirit, like Yuji's brothers. And they didn't disintegrate when Yuji killed them, and Sukuna isn't a cursed womb. You're correct. Sukuna is not a cursed womb. He's an incarnated cursed object. And the reason they didn't disintegrate, the cursed wombs I mean, is because they were in human vessels. The very same way that Ryu didn't disintegrate as an incarnated cursed object in his human vessel. The reason Sukuna did was because Yuji stripped him away from his vessel, Megami. He's just like Naoya turning into a curse after he died, only he was bound and cursed by Kenjaku. Not true. Naoya is a vengeful cursed spirit, like Rika. They became those because they were killed without the use of cursed energy. Like I mentioned earlier, Sukuna was never defeated, never killed. He didn't become a vengeful cursed spirit. He is an incarnated cursed object. But far be it from me to question you, so Mr. Reader, if you'd like to brush up yourself, I went ahead and highlighted some subjects from the fan book if you'd like to brush up on what the difference between these things are. And just for good measure, if you want to take a look at which section Sukuna falls under, feel free. And also, while you're here, take a look at this quote where Gege reveals that he was called the King of Curses while he was human. Now to everyone else, I hope this helped clear things up, and thank you so much for watching.